Hello and welcome. I'm James Ezimoha and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. The United States and Iran are reportedly close to reaching an agreement that would pause fighting in the Gulf. Russia says its forces have captured 2 settlements in eastern Ukraine as both sides report fresh strikes. And the Democratic Republic of Congo is reporting more than 670 Ebola cases and 136 deaths. Now, the United States and Iran are reportedly close to a deal that could pause the conflict in the Gulf. It could be signed as early as Sunday. Separate talks are also moving forward on reopening the Strait of Hormuz before the G7 summit in France next week. Here's more.
A memorandum between the United States and Iran to halt the war in the Gulf could be signed as soon as Sunday, according to the Reuters. One source said language in the memorandum was still being finalized, and Iran was sticking to its position that the deal must also end fighting in Lebanon. The aim was to finalize the wording by Saturday, so the agreement could be signed by US Vice President J.D. Vance and Iran's Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf. No venue had been established, but Geneva was emerging as the likeliest. A senior Iranian source told Reuters that the draft would waive sanctions on Iran's oil, unfreeze billions of dollars of its funds, and require a cessation of hostilities on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Nuclear issues would be set aside for later talks. The waiving of sanctions, unfreezing of Iranian assets, and halt to Israeli attacks on Lebanon are essential Iranian demands. The source made no mention of what Iran might offer in return. The diplomatic breakthrough could also pave the way for a separate but closely related agreement on maritime security. According to Bloomberg, the United States and Iran are nearing a deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz ahead of next week's G7 summit. Senior officials told the outlet that prospects for an agreement are high, with another source indicating that the arrangement is likely to take the form of a memorandum of understanding rather than a legally binding treaty.
Now, oil markets saw a sharp decline on Friday, with prices falling to their lowest level in nearly 2 months. Investor sentiment was shaped by signals of a possible easing in tensions between the United States and Iran. Analysts say recent movements continue to be driven largely by political headlines and shifting expectations.
Oil prices fell by more than 4% on Friday, June 12th. Prices dropped to their lowest level in nearly 2 months. The decline came after US President Donald Trump cancelled planned strikes on Iran. Expectations of easing tensions also affected the market. Brent crude fell by more than 4% to $86.5 per barrel. US West Texas Intermediate dropped by 4.3% to $84 per barrel. Both benchmarks are at their lowest level since April 17th.
The gas will go down. As soon as the war's over, it'll drop like a rock. There's so much of it. It's all over the place, sitting all over the oceans of the world. And it'll go down. But what won't happen is if Iran had a nuclear weapon and used it, then the whole world is a different place. You're not going to have to pay a little bit more for gasoline. The oil will go down rapidly as soon as the war is over.
Analysts say the headlines are driving the market, with prices falling as expectations of a deal increase. Oil inventories remain low. It will take time to rebuild stocks. Iran has said it has closed the Strait of Hormuz. It has also warned ships using the passage. The strait carries around 20% of global oil shipments. The US military says commercial ships are still moving through the waterway. ING analysts say prices could rise again if oil flows are not restored by late July. They warn prices could reach $120 to $130 per barrel. Goldman Sachs has cut its 2027 Brent crude price forecast to $80 per barrel. It cites higher supply and weaker demand. OPEC has also lowered its 2026 global oil demand growth forecast. However, it expects demand to rise again in 2027.
Now, Russia says it has captured 2 settlements with troops advancing in northern Donetsk. This comes as both Moscow and Kyiv report strikes and civilian casualties. Ukraine said it carried out overnight strikes on several targets inside Russia, including oil refineries and drone production facilities. Both sides reported civilian casualties, with 2 people killed and 10 injured in Russia's western region. Separately, 1 person was killed and at least 4 others injured in drone attacks in Ukraine's Sumy and Mykolaiv regions. Now, internal European divisions are rising over who holds the legitimate mandate to negotiate a future peace settlement for Ukraine. Ahead of the G7 summit in France, countries like Italy and Poland have openly challenged the exclusive role of the informal E3 alliance. Foreign policy experts suggest this rift comes at a critical time of transatlantic uncertainty.
Italy is challenging the foundational legitimacy of smaller European diplomatic formats in shaping future negotiations with Russia. Addressing lawmakers in Rome, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni argued that restricted coalitions of individual capitals lack the collective mandate to represent the wider European Union, calling for a single, formally authorized representative instead.
In any serious peace scenario between Ukraine and Russia, several conditions depend on Europe, concern Europe, affect Europe, and it is up to Europe to negotiate them. What I mean is that our firmness toward Russia must not turn into diplomatic blindness or self-exclusion.
The criticism is directly aimed at the informal E3 grouping of Britain, France and Germany, which recently outlined core ceasefire conditions in London, including security guarantees and the freezing of Russian assets. However, diplomatic observers point out the inherent limitations of the format. Britain is no longer an EU member, while central regional players like Italy and Poland remain excluded from the inner circle.
For this reason, I have long supported the need to identify an authoritative figure, entrusted with the confidence and mandate of all member states, to represent Europe's point of view, and it is in this direction that I continue to work.
This institutional rift is expanding. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk echoed Rome's concerns, stating that Warsaw's critical position on NATO's eastern flank makes its exclusion impossible to justify. Analysts emphasize that for Poland, the issue is immediate physical security, while for Italy, it is a direct pushback against Paris and Berlin, directing EU policy without broader institutional consensus. The urgency for coordination is heightened by ongoing diplomatic shifts in Washington. Foreign policy experts suggest that European governments are seeking to preempt potential changes in future US negotiating positions regarding Ukraine. However, individual diplomatic initiatives from the E3 capitals continue to face resistance from member states demanding a unified institutional approach, with no single official holding a comprehensive mandate to negotiate post-war orders on behalf of the entire bloc. This institutional dispute is set to be a key point of coordination at the G7 summit in Evian next week, where European leaders will attempt to align their diplomatic frameworks.
Now, more cases of the Ebola virus have been reported by health officials in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They are warning that the country's latest outbreak shows no sign of slowing. Here's our report.
Ebola is still spreading in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The number of confirmed cases has risen to more than 670, including 136 deaths, according to health authorities. The latest figures, released on Thursday, include 41 new cases and 9 additional deaths reported the previous day. The outbreak is mostly in the eastern provinces of Ituri, North Kivu and South Kivu, and is caused by the Bundibugyo strain of the virus. Officials say the disease has now affected 29 health zones, with new areas in North Kivu and Ituri reporting infections. Health authorities warn that cases have been increasing by the week. They say there is a risk the outbreak could spread rapidly to new locations if control measures are not strengthened. More than 5,700 people who may have been exposed to the virus are currently being monitored. However, officials say contact tracing remains below target levels, making it harder to break chains of transmission. The outbreak was officially declared on May 15th. It's the country's 17th Ebola outbreak since the virus was first identified there in 1976. Authorities are particularly concerned because the affected region is home to a large number of displaced people, with a frequent cross-border movement with neighbouring countries.
Now, China has called for greater international economic cooperation and inclusive growth during a high-level video conference hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron ahead of next week's G7 summit in France. From Beijing, here's Manu Magdum.
In a video call with the French president, China's Vice Premier Zhang Guoqing urged countries to strengthen economic cooperation and maintain an open global trading environment. Speaking just days before leaders gather for the G7 summit in France, the call focused on addressing global economic imbalances. According to the Chinese media, Zhang emphasized the need for a free and easy trade environment and called for an assessment of the comparative advantages of different economies. He said that China remains committed to high-level opening up and is willing to share development opportunities to contribute greater stability and certainty to the global economy. Macron, meanwhile, stressed the importance of international coordination to address economic imbalances and prevent disruptive financial adjustments. The discussions come amid growing concern in Europe over China's trade surplus and the influx of competitively priced Chinese exports, especially the electric vehicles and batteries. European leaders are expected to debate China-related trade policies following the G7 summit. Manu Maktoum, A-News, Beijing.
Now, Pope Leo XIV has reached the final stage of his visit to the Canary Islands in Spain, where he has focused on migration issues. Here's more.
Pope Leo XIV has used his visit to Tenerife in Spain to deliver a strong message on migration, calling for greater protection and dignity for people seeking a better life in Europe. During his trip to the Canary Islands on Friday, the pontiff met migrants, aid workers and local officials and visited reception centres where he heard first-hand testimonies about dangerous journeys across the Atlantic. The Pope issued a stern warning to criminal networks involved in human trafficking, urging them to repent and end the exploitation of vulnerable migrants.
From this square, I wish to address a clear message to those who take advantage of people's desperation, to those who organize death routes, traffic in human beings, withhold documents, exploit workers, threaten women, deceive families, and turn the suffering of others into a business. Stop. Repent.
Speaking directly to migrants, Pope Leo highlighted their shared humanity and called for more compassionate treatment of people on the move.
Dear brothers and sisters, in a sense, all of us are migrants, for we are all pilgrims on our way to our heavenly homeland. Let us help make this journey more humane for everyone.
The Canary Islands remain one of the main entry points for migrants arriving in Europe, with thousands risking their lives each year on the Atlantic crossing in search of safety and opportunity. The Pope is expected to conclude his visit before returning to Vatican.
Now, the world is on track to welcome in its first trillionaire. Now, that's a lot of zeros, and it's none other than Elon Musk. This is the result of the largest IPO in Wall Street history, set for Friday, with investor demand expected to be strong.
Thank you very much.
Elon Musk is on the verge of becoming the world's first trillionaire as SpaceX prepares to make its highly anticipated Wall Street debut on Friday. The company has already raised a record $75 billion from investors ahead of its initial public offering. Shares are priced at $135 each. The listing values SpaceX at nearly $1.8 trillion, making it one of the most valuable companies in the world. The IPO is expected to be the largest in history, reflecting strong investor confidence in Musk's vision and the company's future growth plans. Musk says the decision to take SpaceX public comes as the company prepares major investments, including the deployment of 100,000 next-generation Starlink satellites and the development of AI-powered data centers in space. SpaceX, which began as a private rocket company focused on reducing the cost of space travel, has grown into a global leader in satellite communications, launch services, and artificial intelligence. The company also aims to eventually establish a human settlement on Mars. Despite becoming a publicly traded company, Musk is expected to maintain tight control over SpaceX through a dual-class share structure that gives him more than 80% of voting power. The landmark listing is being closely watched across financial markets and could pave the way for other high-value technology firms to go public in the coming years. If shares hold at or above their offering price when trading begins, Musk's trillion-dollar personal fortune will make him the wealthiest individual in the world.
I think we should be really concerned.
Now, the 2026 FIFA World Cup is being described as a major security challenge, with authorities deploying large-scale police and security operations across host cities. Officials say the focus is not only on stadiums, but also on protecting surrounding public spaces and fan areas throughout the tournament.
Security officers and police are being deployed for the 2026 FIFA World Cup to protect fans, players and venues, as organisers prepare for what is being described as an unprecedented security challenge. On the day of a send-off match in Chicago, where the United States faced Germany, fans were met with a heavy police presence. Large municipal vehicles formed a protective perimeter outside the stadium, while all spectators underwent strict security screening before entry. One of the key concerns is that the tournament is taking place against the backdrop of the US-Iran conflict, which security experts say has heightened public concern. The concerns extend far beyond the stadiums themselves, with officials warning that the biggest challenges lie in protecting surrounding public spaces.
Guarding the stadium, that's truly the easiest part. They could do that with guards, gates, and guns, and including that air cover that'll be necessary. It's those soft targets outside the stadium. You think about the parking lots or the places people are going around the games, the restaurants. Those are much harder to secure, but law enforcement has to be ready for anything.
Authorities say anti-drone systems will be deployed around stadiums, with the US Department of Homeland Security warning that drones remain one of the biggest security concerns. With matches spread across 16 host cities in 3 countries, the 2026 tournament will be the most geographically dispersed World Cup in history. The overall security operation is expected to cost more than $1 billion, involving federal agencies, local police, and private security firms.
All right, after the break, we'll examine reports that the United States and Iran could sign a preliminary agreement as early as Sunday. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now, reports suggest that the United States and Iran are close to signing an initial agreement aimed at ending months of confrontation. However, Tehran says no final decision has been made and insists key issues remain unresolved. Joining us now is Matthew Breiser, former U.S. diplomat, joining us from Istanbul. Good to have you, sir.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Now, if this agreement is signed, what are the key issues it would actually resolve, and which ones would remain beyond its scope?
Well, we haven't seen the text yet. I mean, President Trump, though, just in the recent couple hours has attacked the Iranian side for allegedly leaking some of the details. But in any case, what's been reported widely is essentially a 60-day ceasefire, which is actually there's a ceasefire in place. So that's really not anything new. But the main thing is that I guess this would mean the two sides would stop shooting at each other and having these exchanges like have happened over recent days, limited missile exchanges. But most importantly, that the Strait of Hormuz would be reopened. So Iran would lift its restrictions, all restrictions on transit, and the United States would lift its blockade. And then after 60 days would be apparently negotiations on all the other issues. So those are the hardest ones, right? Those are, of course, Iran's nuclear program and the U.S. demand that Iran suspend its uranium enrichment and turn over the 400 kilograms of enriched uranium that were apparently buried a year ago when the U.S. struck Iran. From the Iranian side, in its desiderata, it would include negotiations on the lifting of sanctions and the unfreezing of assets held by the United States and its allies, and, yes, further discussions of Iran's nuclear program or uranium enrichment program. Whether the discussions would include two other issues the U.S. has demanded be included in the past, which is ending Iran's support for its proxies in the region, as well as curtailing its ballistic missile program, remains to be seen. But the key issue that still needs to be worked out, of course, is Iran's demand that Lebanon and a ceasefire by Israel against Lebanon be part of the agreement. And so far, Israel has said, no, we're not going to implement a ceasefire. And President Trump has been silent on that point, other than reports earlier this week and last week that he had pressured Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop the fighting in Lebanon.
Now, Iran says no final decision has been made. Is this a genuine disagreement over details or a political effort by both sides to manage expectations?
Well, there's no way for us on the outside to know, but recall that a couple of weeks ago, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, President Trump made a very similar announcement that, the agreement was just about in hand. It should be concluded over the weekend, but he wanted to consider it further before agreeing. And so the Iranian side claims that the United States then went beyond what was agreed in principle and made more significant demands. And now the U.S. is claiming that's what Iran is doing as well by saying it's not yet ready to approve the text. My guess is what Iran is doing is trying to pressure the United States to lean on Israel to stop its attacks on Hezbollah, the Iranian client in Lebanon. And how that works out remains to be seen. I mean, we've seen today that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has continued Israel's attacks in southern Lebanon. And so President Trump, it seems, if I'm correct, that what Iran is waiting for in approving the text is whether Israel stops its attacks on Lebanon. Then there's going to be, I think, another confrontation between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu over Trump's demands that Netanyahu stop the offensive in Lebanon and Netanyahu's insistence on continuing that offensive.
Now, a key objective is reopening the Strait of Hormuz. How quickly could a political agreement translate into real confidence for shipping and energy markets?
That's a great question. First of all, I mean, an agreement could translate into an, full resumption of Straits traffic immediately. But yeah, you asked something more important. You asked how quickly could confidence return on the part of shippers and insurers that vessels can transit safely through the strait. And there's no answer to that because it's a psychological question you're asking, and it depends on whether, if once the strait traffic is reopened, the Iranian government or the Iranian regime ceases threatening ships moving through the corridor, and on whether the United States similarly does not use military force as some way to pressure Iran on other aspects that are going to be negotiated, as we already discussed, after 60 days. So it would take some amount of time. I mean, immediately, some ships would move through. Some higher risk tolerance insurance companies and shipping companies would want to move more vessels through. Some Greek ship owners, there have been reports, have moved a large number of vessels just to the outside of the straits, waiting to get transit going again. But for other more risk-averse shippers, it could take a while, and they might want to see a few weeks even of smooth and safe sailing through the strait before they're willing to commit their vessels to that transit.
Now, if sanctions, relief and economic recovery are part of the discussion, what is Iran seeking politically beyond immediate financial benefits then?
Well, the financial benefits are huge, right? I mean, that if we think back to the end of last year, beginning of this year, there were those nationwide protests about economic suffering in Iran that really seemed to worry the regime to the point that apparently the regime killed 10,000 or tens of thousands of their fellow citizens. So getting those economic assets unfrozen and sanctions lifted has a big political impact for Iran. But going beyond that, in terms of international politics, what Iran has insisted on is some sort of a guarantee that the United States, once there's an agreement, isn't going to attack Iran again. And, you know, it's hard to think, at least for me, of any deterrent against the United States from doing that again, other than Iran exerting some sort of control over the Strait of Hormuz. So that gets back to your previous question. It's really difficult to say when shippers will feel confident that the strait is safely open because, as many Iranian officials have said, its newfound ability to constrict traffic through the strait is more politically effective than, you know, having many nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm. Now, Israel has not been central to these negotiations and has expressed concerns about concession to Iran. How difficult will it be for Washington to maintain regional support for this agreement then?
Well, there won't be an agreement, I think, if Israel continues its assaults on Lebanon, certainly if it attacks Beirut and the southern suburbs of Beirut. But if Israel stops those assaults or curtails them significantly, then I think it will be easy for President Trump to garner the support of Gulf allies, because Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Iraq, they all want this war to end, because the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is imposing so much economic cost on them, and Qatar as well. And also, you know, especially UAE and Qatar as well have incurred severe both property damage and damage to energy assets. So the allies of the United States want to see this agreement hold. So it's really going to come down to, I think, whether or not President Trump is able to exert sufficient pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to get Israel to stop a war in Lebanon that's very popular in Israel, by the way. I mean, you know, Israel has a point that for decades the Lebanese government has failed to dislodge Hezbollah, especially since the ceasefire agreement brokered by the United States between Lebanon and Israel a year and a half ago to move Hezbollah north of the Litani River. And so from its current positions, Hezbollah can use its rockets and missiles to strike northern Israel. And, you know, any responsible leader of any country would want to eliminate that threat. The fear, though, I think, in Washington is that Netanyahu is trying to go even further and is indeed maybe trying to sabotage this memorandum of understanding between Iran and the United States by pushing well beyond the Litani River and toward Beirut.
Mm-hmm. Now, finally, sir, after months of military confrontation, does this agreement represent a change in strategy from both sides, or simply recognition that escalation has reached its limits?
I think, I think the latter. I think both Iran and the United States have learned that their dispute is not going to be resolved through some sort of large-scale war. You know, I mean, military force has an important impact on shaping what's politically acceptable to each side. And I think the Trump administration has used military force quite effectively in this regard. But ultimately, military force would not resolve this. There will have to be a negotiated agreement between the two sides. You know, I think there's war weariness on both sides. Even though the Iranians put out a brave face and say time is on our side, the regime knows that the economy is so weakened and the people of Iran are so upset with the incompetence and corruption of the Iranian government that the economy needs to get moving. So I think the Iranians feel that they need to wrap things up, and I think the United States does as well. President Trump, you know, he's feeling not only the pressure of upcoming midterm elections this November in the United States to the Congress, but also the stark reality that even though oil prices have not gone up as high as many people expected when the Strait of Hormuz was shut, including myself, I'm surprised they didn't go higher. Now I understand why they didn't. And the major reason is there had been so much oversupply in global markets that there were buffers of oil that have been drawn upon since the strait was closed to keep the oil price down, as well as there's been reduced demand in Asia because of the high prices. But that oil, those buffers, the oil in storage, is about to be fully used up. So if there isn't agreement is not in agreement within a couple of weeks, a week or so, even 2 weeks, then I think we could see a very large spike in oil prices that could cause major economic disruption around the world. The Trump administration knows that as well, so that economic reality is applying pressure to the Trump administration to come to an agreement. But at the end of the day, this is just going to be restarting the clock. It's going to be an open Strait of Hormuz, and still only the beginning of what started this whole war from the U.S. side in the first place, which is its desire to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. So after all this warfare, we're simply going to get to the beginning and start over, and hopefully there will be constructive negotiations on the nuclear issue.
Matthew Breiser joining us from Turkey. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Coming up next, stay with us for the regional stories.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to A News. Now, Azerbaijan is set to open an embassy in Portugal. The relevant bill was approved during an extraordinary session of the Milli Majlis. The new embassy will be based in the Portuguese capital of Lisbon. Speakers during the debate said that the opening of the embassy would help strengthen ties between Azerbaijan and Portugal, particularly in the area of interparliamentary cooperation. It was also noted that relations between the two countries are currently at a good level. In a letter addressed to Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, Portuguese President Antonio José Seguro said that the opening of embassies in Baku and Lisbon would contribute to the further development of bilateral relations. A new economic analysis suggests the CIS4 group of economies, which includes Armenia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, could have more room to lower interest rates despite global inflation concerns.
The Global Financial Services Group ING says the economic outlook for Armenia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan is increasingly shaped by domestic factors rather than global inflation pressures. The group is known as CIS4, or the Commonwealth of Independent States 4. The report says higher commodity prices are strengthening external and fiscal buffers for exporters, particularly Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. At the same time, currency stability and softer inflation are giving policymakers more flexibility on interest rates. In Armenia, the recent parliamentary election result is seen as supporting policy continuity, but analysts warn that unresolved tensions with Azerbaijan and uncertainty over EU integration could still weigh on investor sentiment. With inflation remaining moderate, the Central Bank of Armenia is expected to keep its policy rate unchanged at 6.5% next week. Azerbaijan is expected to benefit most from elevated energy prices, with stronger fuel revenues improving both its budget and current account outlook. Analysts forecast a budget surplus of about 5% of GDP and a current account surplus of around 11% of GDP in 2026. In Kazakhstan, despite a recent 100 basis point rate cut, real interest rates remain high, and the tenge is still supported by non-oil exports and portfolio inflows. Analysts believe the central bank is likely to pause further cuts for now, although additional easing could follow later if currency stability continues. Uzbekistan is seen as having the strongest case for further easing. The restart of gold exports, renewed portfolio inflows, and slower inflation have improved the outlook for the soum, the local currency. And analysts say the Central Bank of Uzbekistan could cut its policy rate from 14% at next week's meeting, even as many global central banks remain cautious.
Now, Turkey and Poland are looking to deepen defense industry cooperation, with top officials from both NATO allies holding talks in Warsaw. The discussions come as European countries continue to boost their defense capabilities amid heightened security concerns across the continent. Adam Moro has more.
Turkey and Poland exchanged views on ways to expand defense industrial cooperation during a visit to Warsaw by Turkish defense industry chief Haluk Gorgon. Gorgon met Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz on Thursday for talks focused on existing defense projects and future collaboration opportunities. After the meeting, Gorgon said bilateral cooperation continues to grow based on what he described as Poland's deep-rooted friendship with Turkey and a shared approach to defense and security. He said discussions had focused on strengthening the strategic partnership between the two NATO allies and enhancing cooperation across the defense sector. According to the Polish Defense Ministry, talks also addressed military technical relations, industrial cooperation, and efforts to bolster both countries' defense capabilities. Another key topic addressed at the talks was cooperation in the field of unmanned systems, including the use of Turkish Bayraktar drones and the sharing of operational experience. The two sides also explored opportunities involving technology transfers and stepped up investment in each other's defense sectors. The Thursday meeting reflects the growing defense ties between Ankara and Warsaw, at a time when NATO members are increasing military spending and seeking to strengthen their domestic defense industries. In recent years, Poland has emerged as one of Europe's largest defense spenders, while Turkey has become a leading exporter of military technology, especially in the field of unmanned aerial systems. This is Adam Moro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Now, hundreds of Afghan prisoners held in Iran are being transferred back to Afghanistan under an agreement between Kabul and Tehran. For the details, here's Tamim Bahis from Kabul.
More than 500 Afghan prisoners held in Iran have been transferred back to Afghanistan. Afghan authorities say the transfer is part of an ongoing process agreed between Kabul and Tehran to return Afghan prisoners from Iranian jails. The latest figures show that a total of 573 Afghan prisoners have been transferred to Afghanistan in two phases of the 11th round of the prisoner transfer committee process. Officials have not disclosed the specific charges against the latest group of prisoners, although previous transfers of Afghan inmates from Iran have often involved drug-related convictions. The Afghan embassy in Tehran also said that as part of the same process, one female Iranian national was transferred from Afghanistan to Iran. The transfer of prisoners has remained a regular topic in discussions between Afghan and Iranian officials. In recent years, thousands of Afghan citizens have faced legal proceedings in Iran and other countries across the region. Officials at the Afghan embassy in Tehran say the process is not yet complete, and that further transfers of Afghan prisoners from Iran to Afghanistan will continue in the coming days. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Now, authorities in Georgia have arrested two foreign nationals accused of laundering hundreds of millions of dollars in cryptocurrency. It's part of a major international crackdown on organized cybercrime. The sweep also targeted a hidden online forum used by criminals around the world. Our correspondent, Nini Nicolashvili, has more.
Georgian prosecutors say two foreign nationals have been arrested in the region of Atara, accused of being members of an organized crime group that laundered several $100 million in cryptocurrency. The arrests were part of a large-scale operation involving nearly 100 law enforcement officers from Georgia, the United States, and Poland. Investigators carried out searches at dozens of locations across the country, and authorities seized more than vehicles, electronic and paper documents, along with high-value real estate and bank accounts, all believed to have been used to hide illegal profits. The group, known as Audi A6, has been active since 2022, according to officials who also say they offered money laundering services to cyber criminals in exchange of large payments. The group is also accused of running a forum called Dark2 Web, which advertises illegal services and connects criminals worldwide. The operation was supported by Eurojust and Europol, along with the U.S. Secret Service and Poland's Cybercrime Bureau. Investigations are continuing across multiple countries. Nini Nikolai-Shrelit, Tbilisi, A News.
Now, Georgia's Prime Minister Irakli Kopakidze has arrived in Kyrgyzstan for his first official visit. It marks a new chapter in ties between the two countries. Transport links, trade and regional connectivity are high on the agenda. Faris Kalamaziner reports from Almaty.
Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kopakidze is in Kyrgyzstan for an official visit, the first of its kind since diplomatic relations between the two countries began. In the capital Bishkek, he held high-level talks with the President Sadyr Japarov. Discussions focused on transportation and trade with an emphasis on regional connectivity. Kyrgyzstan sees Georgia as a key gateway between Asia and Europe through its Black Sea ports. That includes the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan railway project, the result of a trilateral agreement signed in June 2024. President Sadyr Japarov said the railway could significantly boost cargo transit through Kyrgyzstan toward Georgian ports, a new route linking Asian and European markets. And according to Kyrgyz authorities, around 9,000 workers are working on the project. Beyond infrastructure plans, talks focused on more practical issues, including the possibility of direct flights between cities, stronger trade ties and investment. Cooperation deals were also signed, covering education, radiation protection and nuclear safety. Trade turnover between the two countries reached nearly $192 million in the first quarter of this year, with cars remaining one of Kyrgyzstan's main imports from Georgia. The visit ended with both sides signaling plans for closer cooperation. Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kopakidze invited President Sadyr Japarov to pay an official visit to Tbilisi, an invitation the Kyrgyz leader accepted. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
All right, after the break, we'll examine why Romania is looking more closely at the South Caucasus after Armenia's parliamentary elections. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now, Romania says it wants to deepen cooperation with South Caucasus, highlighting peace, security and regional stability as essential for unlocking the area's economic potential. The statement comes after Armenia's parliamentary elections as the region enters a new phase. Joining us now is Veresh Chongo, foreign policy expert. Good to have you.
Good afternoon. Good to be here. Thank you.
Now, why is Bucharest placing greater attention on the region now?
Bucharest is paying more attention because the South Caucasus is no longer a distant neighborhood. It has become directly linked to Romania's own Black Sea security, energy, diversification and connectivity interest. Because of the neighboring war, there is a big change in the wider Black Sea area, turning routes through the region and Central Asia into strategic alternatives to the Russian-centered corridors. And the EU in 2025 launched the Black Sea Strategy, which explicitly frames the Black Sea as a connector between Europe and Central Asia and the Eastern Mediterranean, while also stressing maritime security, energy, infrastructure, and hybrid threats. And there is also a Romanian national interest here, because Romania wants to strengthen its role as a Black Sea hub, including through the Port of Constanța energy projects, digital infrastructure, and EU-backed security initiatives. In 2025, Romania even expressed interest in hosting the planned EU Black Sea Maritime Security Hub, which shows that Bucharest wants not only to observe the region, but to shape the European response to it.
Now, this statement came after Armenia's election. Does Yerevan's changing foreign policy direction create new opportunities for countries like Romania?
Armenia's changing foreign policy direction does create opportunities, but Romania has to handle them carefully because it also has a long-standing strategic partnership with Azerbaijan. The vote in Armenia was widely interpreted as a mandate for closer ties with Europe, peace with Azerbaijan, and diversification away from Russia. So the Romanian diplomacy immediately framed the result as a choice for peace, stability, prosperity, and closer ties with Europe.
Now, from Azerbaijan's perspective, what would meaningful Romanian involvement look like? Would it be investment, diplomacy, or connectivity projects?
I think from Azerbaijan's perspective, meaningful Romanian involvement would probably mean all three you mentioned, but with the strongest emphasis on implementation. Baku is likely to value Romania most when Bucharest helps turn political declarations into pipelines, cables, port links, investment flows, and EU-backed infrastructure status. Romania was the first EU member state to sign a strategic partnership with Azerbaijan. Let's mention this here.
Now, connectivity is becoming central to the region's future. How important are transport, energy, and trade routes in attracting greater European involvement?
It is very important from the from Romania's point of view and from the EU point of view as well. There is a big project connecting the Black Sea, like a cross-regional connectivity agenda. And there is a middle corridor, the Caspian and the Black Sea route, and the green energy corridor where Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Hungary and Romania are involved. So it is crucial for Central Eastern European countries as well.
Now, the South Caucasus is attracting interest from many external actors. How does Romania's approach differ from the larger geopolitical competition around the region?
Romania's approach is different because it does not have the scale or the ambition to dominate that region. It is not trying to create a sphere of influence. Its approach is more institutional, project-based, and EU-linked, like energy security, Black Sea stability, transportation links, digital infrastructure, trade, and support for sovereignty and territorial integrity. So that does not mean that Romania is neutral in geopolitical terms, because Romania is an EU and a NATO member, which means that its policies are aligned with the Euro-Atlantic interests.
Let's come back to Azerbaijan for a second. Romania has previously supported normalization between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Could Bucharest play a larger role as the peace process develops?
Romania is supporting very much the peace treaty and related political declaration in August 2025, describing it as a significant breakthrough. Bucharest could play a larger role, but it would most likely be a supporting and blaming role rather than a principal mediator. The main mediation tracks have involved the EU, the United States, and direct Armenian-Azerbaijan negotiation, while Romania's comparative advantage is in its credibility as an EU and NATO Black Sea state. So its strategic partnership with Azerbaijan and its ability to support practical projects, this could make peaceful, economically valuable support to the peace project.
Now let's dive deeper into one of your previous answers. Could countries like Romania help reduce competition between larger powers by focusing on economic cooperation rather than geopolitical rivalry?
I think Romania's approach is to support regions which are close, like the neighboring states. But let's not forget that Romania is a middle-sized country and a middle-sized power. So as a EU and a NATO member, it cannot differ from the big players' policies. It can help. It can try to mediate, but because of its connections to these international organizations, it cannot make a different approach.
Now, looking ahead, what would success look like for Romania's engagement in the region?
In my views, success would mean that Romania becomes a credible European connector between the Black Sea, the South Caucasus, and Central Asia. In practical terms, that would mean progress on the green energy corridor, regular cargo flows linking the Caspian and the Black Sea region, especially through the Romanian port of maybe stronger Romanian business presence in and Georgia, and more visible Romanian role inside the EU debates on connectivity and energy and regional resilience. Diplomatically, success would also mean that Bucharest maintains trust with Baku while developing a serious relationship with Yerevan after Armenia's European turn.
Veres Chongor, foreign policy expert, join us from Romania. Good to have you, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right, that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.